All right. So before we get started, I'm just gonna make sure everything works. Um, okay. I want to make sure everything works before we get started. Um, Let me double check. And, Uh, yeah, everything should be working. So welcome back to the live stream, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Thanks for tuning in. If you are tuning in, if you're watching this after the fact, no worries. Um, This just to recap, this is every week. You can tell it's probably early around 5:30. I'm trying to play around with the time, trying to figure out like, you can let me know what time those watching can let me time what time is more convenient for people. But I thought I would start I would maybe experiment with starting the live stream earlier in the evening. Maybe more people will be I feel like 7 p.m. It's kind of like a weird time for people. That's why I changed it. But yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. This week we got a bit of a hot button topic. The past few days if you've been following U.S. politics with geopolitical trends with Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was at the Oval Office. Trump also had a recent meeting where closed door built with a bunch of with all these billionaires and investment and lead people in Wall Street. Um, Investors and CEOs. So it was a closed door, which made it all the more interesting. And there's some interesting dynamics maybe playing out there, and we can explore that. But I also want to talk about some things that are broadly happening across the globe. Maybe I thought today, because we're nearing the end of November, one more month to go in 2025. So maybe it's a cool idea to maybe kind of wind down 2025. Let's look at some of the geopolitical trends we're likely to see in the coming future. Look at some like maybe come up with like short-term outlook on geopolitical trends. Um, I do realize a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about. It's There's an aspect of it that like you're just looking at what's being coming out of the politicians. Take what a politician says with a grain of salt, and we're going to try to analyze that and what it means for commodity markets, what it means for global trade dynamics, and what this means more importantly for things like energy and critical mineral infrastructure in the coming decades to come. Um, and so before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel. It would really help with the YouTube algorithm. So like, subscribe, turn your notifications on so you never miss a live stream. Also, I know I keep talking about it, but we will be resuming the Commodity Bro podcast. It's just been very hectic on my end. A lot of family things going on, but I will be getting back to that. Also, we will be. I'm thinking of moving the podcast to Wednesdays. So, but I'll keep you posted on that officially. And if you're not subscribed, you should check, or you haven't yet, you should check out my newsletter. I release it every Monday and Friday. Um, and for premium subscribers, you're going to get access to forecast, CFTC analysis, and short-term outlooks, technical analysis, deeper dives into the high-level topics we discussed in the free version. So check that out. I will leave the link in the comment section. You can also follow the link. You can follow the link in my and find it either via my website or just directly on my Substack account through I believe in the bio of my YouTube account of this YouTube channel. So check it out and let me know. And if there's a topic you want discussed in the future, leave a comment below. Anyways, yeah. So let's dive in. So I thought kind of we'd talk about. I thought we would begin just kind of talking broadly. There was I came across this thing and I talked about it. I was talking about it in my newsletter actually this week. If you're following, so if you are subscribed, I go deeper into it. But I came across this article that essentially talked about here. I'll put it. I came across this article and it basically broadly talking about how it came from the EU, the European Commission, um, and it's basically discussing how there's basically a new plan put out by the EU. They're trying to ramp down their purchase of Russian energy. For those of you who don't know, like Russian natural gas, 45% of it at a certain point, like back in 2022, like about like, and at least this is one source. I found other sources that said like crude and other things. There's shadow tankers and stuff. That's a whole other debate. But they're basically avoiding. They're basically tankers, like fleets that were crude fleets that were like evading the Russian sanctions, so going to other parts of the world, but like Europe included, I believe. But natural gas in particular, about 45%. They were reliant on 45%. And Europe has put themselves in kind of an interesting situation. Since ever since Fukushima, all we hear about is everyone's scared of nuclear energy. And wind and solar just is so expensive to develop the infrastructure that kind of natural it leaves natural gas as kind of like this transitionary fuel that's kind of the cheapest method without going fully fossil, which is through crude or through oil or coal. So basically Europe's in this tight spot where they're trying to ramp down. They want to. It's hypocritical of them, and Trump's called them out multiple times. He called them out the UN. I saw in a press briefing where he called them out on this too. But basically, they're funding Ukraine and they're purchasing Russian gas. So it's kind of like feeding the beast and helping feeding the beast while giving the rabbit a little bit of extra push to move on, which is kind of perpetuating this proxy war. And I'm not going to get into this. Like there's we can get. I'm not going to get into the political side of it. I just mentioned it because this kind of paints the picture for where the European Union is. And I mean, if you look at like this is from the European Union, and maybe we can Google and see if there's another number. Like I think it was 45% in 2022, and they're ramping down now to 19%. Let's just Google like percentage then of natural gas that is imported to Europe from the Russia. Um, yeah, 19%. I mean, that's coming from the Commission. 45%, 27. So here's statistics saying 18.19%. So yeah, there's different figures. It's roughly the same. So yeah, that is. I guess that is. I just googled it because sometimes it's good to get kind of an alternative opinion. Like you're not just. I mean, I mean, the European Union is probably the most. One would say that the European Union is probably the best. Get it from the horse's mouth, as they say. But it's a good idea to kind of cross check. Maybe there's other not figures. Get an idea. But yeah, going with the European Union numbers, their purchase, which is I guess you could say is the most reliable, is 90% now, and this is all because of their repower you. And I came if you click on their link here, I remember I looked at this like basically, um, they're basically looking at you see yeah. So and that's going back 2022, 2021. Yeah, so they're kind of this is like a whole other thing. And we'll go into nuclear. Nuclear. I always say this nuclear, and this whole thing is a massive opportunity for the for Canada and the U.S. You know that Trump and Carney have been spending billions, or Carney's pledged essentially trillions of dollars or if you were to look at it, on the if you look at the budget, it's talking about it's in the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on this infrastructure. But I mean, if you look at the price tag and over the next decade, the maintenance, it's essentially like a multi-trillion-dollar investment over the next like basically, if you were to look at it like over the next, if you can probably project it out as like a trillion-dollar investment over the next 50 years, basically, to basically develop these LNG terminals and pipelines across. Um, Basically, in Canada, they're also working with Cameco Corporation. For those of you who don't know, it's the largest uranium manufacturer in the world. It controls 60% of the global supply chain for uranium, and it's based out of northern Saskatchewan. That's crazy market. That's essentially that means Canada, a Canadian company has a lion's share of the market for for natural for not sorry for uranium. That's a massive advantage. We can like and although it's a multinational enterprise, it's not like it's not like it's a crown corporation. It's not like it's a government investment, but it kind of puts Canada on the map in that regard. Helps our economy. Canadian companies benefiting from this global surge in demand for an alternative renewable energy that's cleaner. That's and with SMRs too. Like the more when I speak to people in the industry, like I'm speaking to people like I know in like the Canadian government, and they talk about how like SMR production is like the next big thing. Like they're like it is. It's not just talk. It's they're actually working to build not like power grids. And I remember hearing that the mayor of Calgary, like you don't know, Calgary is the capital, or sorry, Calgary is not the capital. Sorry, Edmonton's the capital. Calgary, I believe, is the second largest. Is like there's two big cities in Alberta, Calgary and Edmonton, basically. And Calgary is a big. Uh, is a big energy city. It's here. Wait, we go on Google Maps, Calgary. It's basically Calgary. Anyway, no, but Calgary, Canada, the mayor of Calgary was talking about like she wants to build. She wants to work with. They're working with the university there out there to basically build a citywide power grid. But then they're working with Danielle Smith, who's the premier of Alberta, sorry, Calgary, Alberta, and they basically want to build a provincial wide energy grid. There you go, and if that's successful, they want to work with Carney too to basically talk about perhaps making a countrywide energy grid. That's a far out thing. I don't think it's going to happen in any time soon. The amount of money it's going to cost, but SMRs are going to play a big role because for those of you who don't know, an SMR is a small. Let me just Google. I'll show you like a small modular reactor. SMRs. Yeah. So basically, they're these small modular reactors. Um, Yeah, it can typically between power outputs between 2 to 300 megawatts. It's crazy amount of energy, and they're essentially like built like Lego blocks. You can basically cut. Here's the government of Canada talking about it. You see, like you can go here. You go to the government of Canada website. It'll show you all. You can watch these videos all about it. You can even Google them, here, like here. Like, you know what I mean? You may read about them a bit, but essentially they're these tiny. They're like these little. They're almost like the way I was described by the mayor when she was talking about it was these almost like these Lego blocks that can power. And essentially she says Lego blocks in the sense that they're really small. Instead of spending billions of dollars to build these massive or hundreds of millions of dollars to build these massive nuclear reactors, which already have a negative reputation after Fukushima, um, you can essentially buy these SMRs cost a fraction of the price, and you buy as you need, and you build out the grid as you need it, and that's really interesting, and that's going to have a lot of I think part of the drive too there is with the data center demand. That's another topic. I don't, it's not really on the topic for today, but interesting if you're interested. Um, and where am I going with this is it's back to natural gas, but and I talk about EU, but it's also there's an interesting dynamic at play here. India and China purchase a lot of natural gas from Russia. It's like they're and what I think is going to happen is we're kind of going to see a shift. you know, we're kind of doing it to ourselves out here, but also we're repositioning. I think things are just going to reposition themselves. That the West, and it's all interconnected. You have the West investing heavily in SMRs, data centers, and then critical mineral infrastructure, trying to combat the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative lion's share of the market, but also, and that's a whole other thing to unpack. But then you have the Indians purchasing the Russians, and the Europeans are divesting from the Russians. So then you have this kind of thing where kind of backs Russia into a corner, and because in a sense, so essentially what's going to happen is, I mean, I'm just talking out loud, but 'cause again, but essentially what you're going to see is basically if trying to think about trying to think kind of think through it logically, like if the Russians are backed into a corner where they only have like where their major buyers are in the east, you're just going to isolate Russia, and what's going to happen is, yes, demand for Russian oil might drop, or Russian energy might drop, put downward pressure on prices. You can look at it from that lens, but also um, production is basically gonna gonna production's eventually gonna equalize with the demand. That's basic remedial economics, and so what's gonna happen is, and it's the same thing the way OPEC plays games with the oil prices, which we'll dive into in a moment. But essentially that's what's gonna happen, and we're actually gonna push, and I think we're just gonna push brick. We're basically isolating. And I mean, it makes sense. We're basically isolating BRICS, but essentially, I think the West is beginning to kind of reshape its free trade agreements, reshape the way it rethinks its trade. And I think Trump was a key player in this. I don't think we would have seen this. I think that prior to Trump, um, I mean, there's a lot of controversy around the guy, but what he's done with these free trade agreements now with Saudi Arabia, even like I mean, that's essentially ensuring that there's gonna be that US, Canada, the West, we're not gonna be left behind in all this. It's kind of forcing the West to rethink how it develops its diplomacy or its relations across the globe, in terms of trade. And yeah, and I mean, back to Saudi, and now I guess we're gonna talk about Saudi Arabia now, because I brought that up. Like I know that Saudi Arabia pledged. I think it was up for. I mean, originally it was. It's now it's sorry, they pledged about 1 trillion. I think I believe all the articles was almost unanimous. I saw they pledged $1 trillion in investment to the U.S. That's up from 600 billion. So, and I think what's happening. There's two things at play. I don't think MBS is doing. I don't think MBS is that naive. I think he's doing this for two strategic reasons. He's doing this to diversify their portfolio away from oil, and I mean not away from oil in the sense they don't want to. They're not happy with their investment, but significant portion of their portfolio is in oil and growing into critical minerals. So they want to diversify in the infrastructure that America is going to start is building under Trump. Data centers and a lot of these other things that are happening, exciting things that are happening in the commodity markets out here in Canada, the U.S. I say Canada too, because what happens in the U.S. deeply affects us. If something happens in the U.S. and the U.S. In the market for American and the market for American commodities basically gets destroyed because of de-dollarization or something, some other external factor, that's going to negatively affect Canadian market. I mean, there could be some upsides. It could increase opportunity for Canadian energy, but we're just not at the same level of. I don't think we're just not there yet that we could truly benefit, well, like, from a complete collapse or a reduction in the American ability to keep up, um, at the global stage. And I don't think we're going to see that. I mean, with all the talk of de-dollarization, I don't think we're not going to see the Americans go away anytime soon. I think they're still a dominant power. We're still going to see them continue to produce. And yeah, I mean, I don't. That's that. I mean, but and I mean, kind of tied together. You're looking at when you think about BRICS, when you think about the EU BRICS. You know, no one knows what's going to happen. I know that. I know that. I know that tariffs are going to play. I think tariffs have kind of forced this. I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back for you. I think we've kind of been seeing this happen in the shadows for years, since since the first Trump administration, um, when we saw what do you call it, the first China-U.S. trade war. Um, but then after that, we kind of had the Biden administration where there was a lot of buildup, almost like a buildup of a lot of controversy. I mean, the U.S. can make arguments for and against what happened. With Afghanistan, you had the Afghanistan October 7th. You had all these different things happening, and this kind of heightened geopolitical risk, and that's what just made the price of gold soar. You saw a lot of commodity. There's an expression, I say gold because there's an expression I heard once, when gold and silver do really well, it means the world's going downhill, geopolitically. And so, as sinister as it might seem, like, war is good for gold, basically. War is good for the price of your commodities, because it's and just, I mean, to put it in perspective, I remember reading once that, like, I think it was like 40%. I think the number was 40%. Let me Google, what's it called? What percentage? 40% of Ukrainian grain supply was based. What was or sorry, 40% of of European grain supply came from Ukraine. Was it 40%? Oh wait, sorry, I just realized I wasn't sharing my screen. Ah, sorry about that. So I guess I'm sharing my screen now, so we can resume. I guess I've been following along, but yeah, this was the article. For those of you who don't know, this was the article I was looking at with the Russian, with the sorry, European Commission. I was talking about that. The Repower EU. This is like an interesting article. Interesting if you're looking at it. And then at the Government of Canada, just Google Government of Canada SMRs. But where's the number? I thought Yeah, so I'm sorry, the numbers there, that was close. Barley and other product Ukraine accounted for over 40% of EU barley imports in 2022, 39% of wheat imports in 2022, 50% of EU corn imports, 60% of its local corn and key livestock feed components. See, that's I mean, it varies. I mean, 40, I think maybe the article is that or what I'm quoting kind of giving it a fairly um over high was giving it, like, kind of a rounding, average, but yeah, that's a significant concentration risk. That just proves my point that, like, I mean, not a concentration risk in the sense that's a bad thing, maybe it is, maybe it's good to diversify, maybe this teaches the Europeans a lesson, in portfolio management. Don't have a bulk share of your imports coming from one country, especially a country that's for years we've seen such geopolitical tension in the Black Sea, Russia and Crimea leading up to the war, the Keystone with the whole thing with the Keystone pipeline, a lot of these things. So that's I mean, that's like a risk, and I guess the risk proved to be real, with the war. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, trying to think. And hold on. Yeah, and, what else? I don't know, I think this week, looking forward into the future, I think kind of give a bit of a forward outlook. I think there's a lot of things that are happening. I mean, I don't wanna word this without sounding, like, vague, but I kinda wanna give a prediction what I think is gonna happen with the US, with BRICS, with EU, um, with Saudi Arabia, and I actually what I think is gonna happen, what we're likely to see is I think OPEC is gonna be more and more is gonna gain more control. OPEC was founded after the '73 conflict. Um, and actually, sorry, there's an interesting thing I could talk about quickly before I get into my outlook, which is, I don't know if you've been following the Israel pipeline with Egypt. Then see, I'm sharing my screen. Let me check if I'm sharing my screen. Nope. Let me share my screen. So I don't know if you follow, but you know that it's seen a pipeline. It's the um, Chevron Chevron in Israel to build gas pipeline to Egypt. Um, let's see. That's oiloilprice.com. So yeah, so they're gonna build a pipeline. I mean, So, why this is relevant, I'll get to that in a minute, but you know that OPEC started in after was basically began after the '73 war. Now it was kind of after the Shah wanted to not after the Iranian Revolution, it was the Arab Spring. You had the Arab world had just got out of a war with the Israelis, so they wanted to. So it was kind of like a response, and they wanted to, I think it was more. more subjective. There's a lot of speculation around what really happened, why they did this, but it was mainly, I think. But I mean, I think the consensus that I've heard at least about this is, or I've spoken to people, is they designed OPEC basically to control, or to reaffirm control over the oil price. This is like when the whole thing is with the petrodollars in the 70s and everything. And so the Arabs essentially wanted to wanted to like wanted to have basically control. They're exporting, they're producing this energy. They want to control the price. So they found this block, this trade block, which is basically OPEC plus, which is the idea is to kind of it's to the producers in the Arab world, the Middle East should have more control over the production, over how much over the pricing, um, and I think what we're gonna see is, and this goes to my whole point, was, I heard that, and like MBS, when I heard MBS say this, he in one of his I think it was at the White House or somewhere. He was at the White House. It was this time in his trip. I can't remember, was that either at the dinner or the White or in the White in the Oval Office, but he was at the White House, and he was basically talking about how he's looking forward to the relationship. This is a long-term investment, and they're doing this because he believes that there's going to be a long-term upside potential on investing in the U.S. Um, and and American allies. And he's even admitted, not I don't think necessarily this time, but in the past, he's even admitted that he sees a lot of potential with normalizing relationships with the Israelis. And I mean, even the Egyptians who have had a pretty rocky relationship, clearly see this potential and in investments in working with the Israelis. And it gets, not to get political, but essentially, I think this is what's essentially happening here. Like you're seeing this entire you're seeing this whole thing play out. Um, you're seeing this whole thing play out in live time. I think we're going to see a look in the next 10 years. We're going to look back at this and say, wow, wow, to think that we had that there was this geopolitical tension in the Middle East. I think and this goes to Iran. Even the Saudis recognize the Saudis have more to gain normalizing with the U.S. and Israel, strengthening the relationship with the U.S., strengthening the relationship with Israel, than they do to gain with a relationship with Iran. And 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 I know, this just goes back. I mean, I'm not going to get. That's all I'll say on that aspect. I don't want to get too political, but then I think with OPEC and BRICS, sorry, not with OPEC, with BRICS and the EU, I think we're going to see the beginning of we are seeing the beginning of a new trading bloc forming. Canada's investing billions of dollars in over the next 50 years, expected to be trillions of dollars in the energy sector, developing its critical minerals domestically. 'Cause Canada has an abundance of these minerals and an abundance of this energy domestically, and they're basically building it up, building the infrastructure. And what's going to happen is they're going to be left in the future. We're going to have all this infrastructure, and that's going to allow us to compete. We're already seeing this with the Kitimat terminal. They're entering phase two of development, and there's two others online in 27, 28. Um, one from LNG Canada as well. Kitimat's LNG it's owned by LNG Canada, and the other one, I'm blanking on the name of it, but and there's more stuff happening in that regard. And I think the U.S. is developing its own. It's continuing to grow. They've been doing this for longer in Canada, so to speak. So they're developing their own infrastructure, and again, that's what the Saudis are investing in. And I think we're gonna see a new trading bloc, and I think Canada, the U.S. are gonna play a big role are gonna play a big role, no matter what people say. Even if the dollar, even no matter how much people talk de-dollarization, the dollarization is not happening that fast, and it's not happening as quickly, and it's not gonna happen in like snap my fingers and it's over. It's gonna happen. It's and the Saudi investment proves this theory that if the Saudis would not pour $1 trillion of their own investment, of their own money into America, if they really believe that the America was over, so to speak, on the global stage. This is not the case, and you can make the argument that MBS is just doing this to reposition themselves, to profit off this, and that may be, and good for them. You invest, but this just proves that I think we're going to see this well into the future. This is not over. The other thing, kind of, I guess we can kind of end on this, but um, where was it? We can kind of end on this, but um, I think BRICS. I think something interesting is happening with BRICS. India's kind of in a weird position. I mean, you can say like India historically has been friendly with the West. You know, India was colonized by the British, and so it has for years it had very close ties with the British. Um, but I think a lot of that's fading away with the BRICS. As much as they have their conflicts, as much as they have their little pity fights with the Chinese, as much as they have their little fights with the Chinese, and they're debating. I think I think they do kind of recognize that they don't agree politically, and they don't align not 100% geopolitically, but they do have a lot to gain. Um, but I think India is recognizing that it has enough to gain from BRICS, that it will continue to do business into the future. Um, and I mean, there's other stuff I could end on this as well. I could add this into that, for I think I've been following this since like 2020, 2021, when, the height of almost like the climate, if we want to say, like, I remember over COVID, there was all this tension, that founded the Pacific Agreement. It was the Pacific Agreement. It was basically that if China attacked Taiwan, um, and there was a few skirmishes where the Chinese came over the map and tried to claim a few mountains off the in northern India. So the Indians moved artillery in and basically had skirmishes, and they captured a whole bunch of Chinese weapons. And a lot of this stuff happened in 2020, 2021. And I think what was happening, and I think that kind of phase of it's over. I think there's still that massive tension. I don't get me wrong; they still don't like each other politically. They still have these arguments because, China, in its own right, is a bit. It can be classified by looking at European standards. China, in its own right, is a colonial power in the sense that through the Belt and Road Initiative, through these aggressive tactics to hold on to territory, to hold on to territory, and it's solely in the name of building their economy, because they have a lot of structural issues. That's the whole other thing. And so, I mean, so does India. I'm ranting on now, but it's two sided. You can't look at India and say it's so black and white. They don't agree politically, so they have their political alliances with the Australians, the New Zealand, the U.S., Japan, and Taiwan, to kind of create a bubble around China, that the Chinese can't just control the Strait of Taiwan. They can't just go in and move in and take everything. And then there's also the microchip thing, which is another thing. But then there's also the Straits of Malacca, and this is causing that risk. But this is again to say that they're still part of this bloc with Russia and China. So they kind of do have to play ball, and they kind of do have to play to the advantage they have being part of BRICS. Anyways, if you like this type of analysis, if you enjoyed this week's live stream, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn notifications on so you never miss a live stream or an episode of the Commodity Bro podcast coming back to the channel. Again, some family stuff, been out of town, been back and forth, but I will try and get back on schedule in the coming week. Or possibly moving it to Wednesday. So more information on that, but hope you enjoyed, and have a great night.